IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat. Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. I'm Manoj Kevalramani, and today I have with me my colleague Pranay Kotasthane, and we're going to be talking about our friendly neighborhood technology giant, and I say that with all irony that I can muster, Huawei, and what's been happening with Huawei over the last few months. It's been some time that we sort of revisited this subject. And in that time period, we've seen that a lot of things have started to change as the pandemic has unfolded and US-China competition has become far more intense in some ways. So Pranay, firstly, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, Manoj. I liked your irony.
So the idea that, we've seen like this is constant friction between the US and China over Huawei. And over the last couple of weeks, we've seen much more happen, right? We've seen... Firstly, Britain take a position on Huawei. And Britain was seen as this sort of middle ground actor where last year you had Trump and Pompeo pushing Boris Johnson on things like you need to take a decisive position on Huawei, either you're with us or not with us. The US had talked about threatening to end some sort of certain aspects of the sort of intelligence cooperation also. And Britain had sort of outlined a position which was reducing Huawei's role in the country's 5G network without really banning it last year. And it had also sort of said things like, not last year, maybe just a few months ago, it had made that position clear. And it had also sort of said that, 30% of core components, 30% of components can come from these companies and so on and so forth. So it had outlined a slightly middling position. But about 2 weeks ago, it took a completely different position, right? It said that Huawei equipment should be completely purged from Britain's 5G network, but by 2027. It also, and to sort of facilitate this process, it said that any companies which are currently buying from Huawei and its ilk can do so till the end of the year. And after that, they have 7 years to replace that equipment, which seems slightly counterproductive because if you want to replace it, you would do it right now. There's also reports about Britain looking at Japan's NEC Corp and Fujitsu as potential alternate suppliers to Huawei. The Chinese reacted to all this with deep disappointment, right? They said that, Huawei said that it was disappointing and Britain would suffer the consequences of this financially, and the foreign ministry of China even went on to say that by making this decision, the UK has, and I'm quoting them, lost its independence and ability to make decisions on its own. This tells you a little bit about how deeply probably this hurt because Britain was seen as that domino, right? That if that domino falls, the rest of them would also start to change. So, Pranay, I want to first get a sense of you. How would you classify this switch that Britain has made? How do we think about this? Because it seems rather sudden, right? About 6-8 months ago, the case was that, oh no, but we can't do this. We are so dependent on Huawei. It's so cost effective and so on and so forth. To today, suddenly saying that, look, we need to wait it out.
All right. Yeah, I think even France's position has somewhat changed, right, over the last few months.
Yeah, the French position is also quite interesting because they publicly, in the last week or so, they've said that, we are not going to be adopting any discriminatory approaches towards foreign players in the French economy. Yet, French authorities have told telecom operators that, they won't be able to renew licenses for companies like Huawei once they expire. And that is, again, an effective phasing out of it. So while they're not saying it, they're actually doing it. In fact, the French cybersecurity agency said earlier this month that it would allow these operators to use them for about, because the licenses are existing for about 3 to 8 years. So until those licenses are there, you're allowed to use them. So the phase out might be longer than Britain, but they're also still talking about phasing it out.
Right. Yeah. So I think one way to classify all these responses of various nation states to Huawei is to look at 3 types of responses. And we, General Prakash Manan and I had written about this a few months back. So there are sort of 3 broad responses that you can apply to the decisions that have been taken with regards to Huawei. So the first one is definitely the economic argument which you mentioned. So the case that is being made is that Huawei beats its competition both in terms of time to market and cost effectiveness. I think that is largely clear, and it stays so even today. So hence, prohibiting Chinese companies from any market will result in slower deployment, higher costs, and significant opportunity costs for consumers. So this is the argument which is being made to say that that's why we need Huawei. And in fact, this line was championed by Huawei itself. You will remember there was this Oxford economic study which was funded by Huawei, and it looked at the economic impact of restricting competition in 5G network equipment. And they gave numbers about what will be the loss for each nation state to make this economic argument case even clearer. Now, if you look at segment the worldwide responses, so you will see smaller economies generally which have no geopolitical tensions with China have often employed this argument in support of Huawei. So for example, you had this Kenya's IT minister saying in July last year that Kenya doesn't plan to ban Huawei, rather it would choose the option where we get value for money for our citizens, which clearly means that they were hinting at Huawei gives us the best options economically, we'll be able to deploy it faster at a lower cost, so why don't we go with it? So this is sort of the broad economic argument, right?
Yeah.
Then the second one is the security first argument. Now this puts security as the primary frame of reference. And the argument there is that Chinese companies need not be banned as long as concerns of Chinese snooping can be mitigated by putting appropriate security protocols in place. So, for example, France actually in the initial days took this decision to allow Huawei on the grounds that network projects will receive case-by-case clearance based on national security considerations, right? So they were saying as long as we can sort of waive these security concerns off, there's no problem having Huawei. And in fact, Huawei also used this approach in India, right, where they offered that we will enter into a no backdoor agreement if needed.
Yeah.
So in here, if you again see a general trend, richer countries which have no geopolitical tensions with China had employed this security first approach. So responses of France, Netherlands, even Britain until a few days back, sort of I would classify it in this zone, right? So they were saying that we'll enforce higher security standards for equipment vendors, but we will allow everyone in, right? So that was the approach. Now, the third approach is what we call the strategic argument. Now, the strategic argument poses this question: like, what is the strategic fallout of handing over your nation state's critical communications infrastructure to a geopolitical competitor? Now, if you ask this question, then the answer is obvious that it would not be prudent from a national security perspective to hand over really critical communications infrastructure to geopolitical competitors. Now, three big economies, US, Japan, and Australia, all of them who have structural geopolitical tensions with China, have employed this argument to ban Huawei from their 5G deployment process. So this is how it was until a few months back, right? But what I see is that a lot of countries are moving away from that security first argument to using the strategic argument even more and make it difficult for Huawei to play a bigger role in their own communications infrastructure. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what's happening. Increasingly, countries, and it's fascinating to me that this has happened. And this shift, I mean, it's important for Beijing to sort of understand that this shift that other countries are making, particularly countries like you outlined, Britain, France, who took a security-first approach. If they're looking at it from a strategic perspective today, it has a lot to do with how Beijing has handled its approach to the world amid this pandemic. And I think there is really no realization that seems to be appearing that China's sort of policies within China itself are self-defeating and they are hurting their own sort of interests across the world, because it is their policies which have actually led to these countries suddenly turning around and saying, okay, we need to take a look at this. Given, last year when the Americans had tried to push all of this, essentially the headlines were that the US's push has failed. And now that's actually turned around And that's so I agree with you. I think that's the way these countries are increasingly looking at it, and that's sort of spawning new ideas, right, about this special group of democracies which will also sort of collaborate on emerging technologies like 5G. And I want to talk to you about that, but I want to also highlight this one thing. The more Huawei is getting squeezed internationally, Huawei is, as an example of China's frontier tech companies, the more they are getting squeezed internationally, the more they're sort of also looking inward and looking at domestic markets. I mean, for example, it's fascinating how Huawei is losing deals around the world, and at the same time, its revenue is going up. And that has a lot to do with sort of domestic market in China. Huawei today commands 50% of China, nearly 50% of China's mobile phone market. It commands a significant share of India's mobile phone market also. And its revenue for this half of the year was actually up by 13% year on year, which is another sort of interesting thing of, how the Chinese have sort of blocked out other players from their market. So while they may be complaining about, unfair treatment and discriminatory practices, they've done exactly the same, structurally blocking out external actors in their emerging tech market. I think that's the point that I wanted to make about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the point which you mentioned about the arrogance of Xi Jinping's foreign policy is definitely playing a role in moving countries from that security first argument to strategic argument. A case in point is Germany, right? Because when Angela Merkel took this position that, Huawei should be allowed and things to that effect. Now, if you see over the last month or so, the opposition to this decision has significantly grown in Germany as well. So a lot of countries are saying, how can we, even if they give the security assurances, how can we strategically give way to a company which has obviously done things which don't fit in with the values of Europe and Germany, right? So that contrast is sort of getting highlighted more and more, even in countries which were earlier were at the margin and could have gone with Huawei or any other company. So that is also interesting to watch.
Okay, so you sort of gave me the perfect segue. Countries at the margin. India essentially has been a country at the margin in some ways. We've refused to take a decision so far on Huawei's participation or Chinese companies' participation in 5G formally. Although informally, when we announced our trials for 5G, in January, Huawei, ZTE found mention as partner companies for other companies in India, right? So I think, and in fact, what was even surprising to me was ZTE was a partner with BSNL. In that list. So that was quite surprising in that sense. But since then, obviously, none of this has really moved forward. So I wanted to get your sense on right now when we are seeing this tension between India and China. And India is taking these so-called economic measures to coerce China to step back at the border. What is, and Huawei is sort of saying things like, we are going to see our revenue target being cut by about 50% in India. We are planning to lay off staff in India, nearly more than half of the staff in the country. And it's a significant employer in India in some ways. So how do we sort of see India's policy towards Huawei? Is India's approach also moving from a non-decision to somewhat security-based approach to perhaps a strategic approach?
Yeah, I think not taking a decision is also a decision, right? Like, yes. It was said, I think Atal Bihari Vajpayee mentioned this in the parliament. Yeah, but yes, India's earlier strategy was to just kick the can down the road, right? Which effectively meant that, yeah, we are allowing Huawei in the trials. We will take a call on the final thing later on. But effectively, it was saying that Huawei is allowed until now. But now, I mean, a lot of water has flown under the bridge after that. And because of it, I think now India's position would also move increasingly from, let's say, a security first approach or an economic approach to the strategic approach, right? So I think there we'll see some more pushback on that. And I also agree to that view that even if Huawei is serious about commitment to mitigating security concerns, I think bestowing an adversary with geopolitical leverage is poor strategy. So it's like giving control of a major port's infrastructure to any Chinese company. This is similar to that. So what we have to take care of the economic angle, like you mentioned. So Probably one approach would be that we shouldn't ban Huawei and ZTE in cheap mobile phones. So we should have a twofold strategy that critical network infrastructure, we should not involve Chinese companies at all. But whereas if you have cheap mobile phones, etc., then it should not be that big a problem. That can be left to the customer. So this way we can sort of try to balance between the economic and the strategic approaches. But Manoj, you had written a paper on this a year ago, looking at Huawei's options in India and things like that. So what do you think has changed, and do your recommendations still hold value, and still are they coming true given how the situation is unfolding?
So in some ways, what we had recommended was this, right? We had recommended that this is a strategic issue and we should not look at it from the prism of simply economics and security. And therefore, we said that any such issues such as this one should be taken by the CCS as opposed to some ministry or some bureaucrat, because it is a strategic issue. And we recommended that this is a strategic issue because of the nature of the competition between the US and China and the possibility of this intensifying going forward. What the pandemic has done, in my view, is that it has accelerated that. What we expected to happen perhaps in 3-4 years has happened in 3 months. Yeah. So, and that sort of made these decisions far more tricky. The other thing that we recommended was that we'd also recommend exactly like what you said, right? That there is no need to ban Huawei or any other Chinese company from sort of edge products, handsets and things like that. Those are helpful and the risk is very, very low from those. In contrast, the distinction that I wanted to draw was that when you mentioned critical infrastructure, what we had said was we were sort of leaning towards a more UK-based approach, where we had said that, if we can find a technological solutions where you can keep them out of the core of the system, or where authentication happens, that is what we should do. Irrespective of anything, we should keep them out of the core of the system. But at other levels in the sort of chain of the network system, they can be included. But that depended on what was technologically feasible, given the security risk. So I think in that sense, we were sort of leaning towards the UK approach. But that approach, our objective was also that, look, it needs to be tested. And I don't know if there is sufficient data to tell us that it works or it doesn't work, because I don't think that Britain has taken a decision based on those parameters. It has taken a decision based on strategic thought process. So I don't think if that sort of necessarily holds. I still think that may be a big challenge for India going forward now, given what's happened in the last 2-3 months between India and China. I don't think that would be acceptable anymore. The other sort of recommendation that we've made, which I think is still stands its ground, is that we need to, rather than taking ad hoc decisions about allowing X, not allowing Y, we need to actually create standards. And one of the ways to do that is to actually create a whitelist of vendors whom companies in India can actually work with. And that gives you create a set of standards, companies who adhere to those standards enter that whitelist, and that sort of allows companies in India, whether it's ISPs, whether it's providers like Airtel, Jio or the others, the ability to work with preferred partners, where you won't end up having these sorts of frictions that we've currently had with Huawei, ZTE and the likes. So I think those were the recommendations that we've made, and I think mostly they've sort of stood the test of time so far. India has not taken a decision, like you also said, I want to point out that I did a piece in Seminar in July where I talked about why India is not taking a decision, and a lot of it has to do with, apart from the sort of geopolitics and the strategic dimension, it has to do with the debate in India also about, us needing to indigenize, and even if we need to wait to get into the sort of 5G and 6G and so on and so forth, it's okay to wait till we are indigenously ready. And that's great in theory, but in practice, it's very challenging. And you may end up delaying a lot of things for no reason whatsoever. And the other issue is also just the mess that our telecom sector is in, the financial mess the telecom sector is in, along with our approach to spectrum allocation. I'll link this piece in the show notes if people want to read it. But yeah, that was our sort of overarching view on this, as to what India should do. And at the moment, I don't know what the government is thinking, but it seems very unlikely that if we are banning Chinese apps on security concerns, that we will allow any Chinese firm in our 5G networks.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if we ban apps, then this is like way high an instrument in that escalation ladder.
Yeah. The last sort of thing that I wanted to talk to you about, Pranay, is this idea of a democracy 10 or a league of democracies, to sort of dominate frontier technologies, or to at least partner with each other on frontier technologies, so that you sort of isolate China and sort of other authoritarian countries which don't necessarily align with your values and systems. How feasible is something like this, given the sort of interconnected nature of technology, not just supply chains, but also in sort of tech research? So how feasible is this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think all those are names just to block China currently because of the way things are unfolding. But there's a fundamental issue given how EU approaches technology regulation and how US approaches technology regulation. So I think that is a big bottleneck. For example, what is the alternative to Huawei right now? It would be you would need Ericsson, you would need Nokia and others. These are companies in Europe. And if you need technology approach and the regulation that EU follows is significantly different, not just from China, but also from the US, right? So if you want to do any of these things, that a group of democracies or whatever name you want to call it, there needs to be some harmonization about these regulation rules as well, right? The EU goes very strict on privacy, and it all often that approach might impede the growth of new firms within EU, whereas US goes in a different direction. So unless that bridge is crossed, I don't see how they'll be able to bridge it together. So there were proposals like a US congressman saying that US should actually buy some stake in Ericsson and Nokia and other European companies. But these are just like, statements being made as of now. Beyond that, I don't know how this approach can work. And even if it does, it's not as if for 5G that can happen immediately, right? Because that technology has already been developed. Companies own IPs on that. So that will be quite difficult. Maybe in the future, it might consider, but they have to overcome the regulatory differences in approaches between Europe and America for that to happen.
Yeah, it sounds like one of those fanciful ideas, which is going to be really, which sort of is slightly detached from reality. In principle, yes, you might think that this is great, and but when you actually come to implement some of these things, it's not at all feasible, or at least it's extremely difficult to do some of these things, and the number of challenges that you'll have to harmonize, like you said, would be really, really difficult to sort of meet. All right. So with that, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you so much, Pranay. And I think we sort of covered all the different dimensions of what's happening with Huawei, apart from, of course, talking about the legal troubles that its CFO continues to find itself. And, of course, the tit for tat of Michael Corvey against the war being held in China. Another specific issue as to why, again, Chinese policy, which is self-defeating for devices. All right. With that, we'll call it a day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Manu.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. So, a great week of shows behind us, and hope that you've been catching up on as much of it as you can. We had Abhishek Bachchan on Football Shutball. Yeah, let me say that again. Abhishek Bachchan was on Football Shutball. Did I mention Abhishek Bachchan was on Football Shutball? That was a fun episode. You should definitely check that out. Really, really deep conversation about cricket and things like that. We had Vikram Kochar on Cyrus Says, talking about the platforms and stuff like what's going on over there. On the note, Maruk had spoken to Sanjay Jha, which was again a really, really interesting conversation. On Edges and Sledges, the guys are having an interesting conversation about, well, what are favorite formats of cricket and things like that. So it's just really been a really, really awesome week on the network, and please do check things out. And with that, hope to see you next week.
Entertainment is like food for the brain. It's a window to culture and a great way to understand the world around us. The internet has changed what it means to be an entertainer. creating new storytellers with millions of fans. It has spawned a new breed, the story sellers, those behind the scenes creating the business for this ecosystem. They work with brands, platforms and channels who are keen to capitalize on an audience hungrier than ever for more stories. I'm Vineet Kanabar, and I have a ringside view to how stories are told and sold. On my show, I bring you creators, artists, executives and marketers for a freewheeling conversation around the business of entertainment. Tune in to Storytellers and Story Sellers for personal stories, analysis and criticism every Thursdays as I talk to the brightest minds telling or selling great stories today.